Today we read in our scriptures from Matthew 14, 13 through 21. Now when Jesus heard this, he withdrew from there in a boat to a lonely place apart. When the crowds heard, they followed him on foot from the town. And as he went ashore, he saw a great throng, and he had compassion on them and healed their sick. When it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a lonely place, and the day is now over. Send the crowd away to go into the villages and buy food for themselves." Jesus said, "They need not go away. You give them something to eat." They said to him, "We have only 5 loaves here and 2 fish." And he said, "Bring them here to me." Then he ordered the crowd to sit down on the grass, and taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and blessed and broke and gave the loaves to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. They all ate and were satisfied. And then they took up 12 baskets full of the broken pieces left over, and those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. This is the reading of the word.
Thanks be to God.
Oh, you all, yeah, that was more enthusiastic than last week. I'm really proud. This is not the only story of when Jesus feeds people. But it comes in the Gospel of Matthew, and it's the first one that we read of as we read through the Gospels. It comes right after 2 a feast of Herod's. And the feast of Herod's at the beginning of this chapter is about how Herod had a birthday party, and he had dancers and feasting and all of those things. And then right after that we hear about Jesus feeding 5,000 men besides women and children. Now, that's 5,000 men plus women and children. So if you equate all of those numbers together, because in those days you traveled with your family, your household, we're talking probably double that number, if not triple that number. And they took 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. He looked up to heaven, and he broke it into the baskets, and he passed it among the people, and they ate until they were satisfied. I'm already looking towards Thanksgiving. Because who doesn't feel at the end of that meal, when it's all done, and I mean sometimes, I don't know, some of y'all are crazy and wash dishes right away. Those of us who are lazy like me sit there and go, can they wait until morning? But you know that feeling of satisfaction when you are full, right? You might sit on your lazy boy recliner, put your seat up, and just go, right? We're full. We're satisfied. We have had enough. 15,000 people ate from 5 loaves and 2 fishes because Christ held them up and prayed. It didn't take a lot. And yet all were satisfied. That word can mean a lot of things to many people. To some of us it means content. For some of us it means full. I am always satisfied after a meal at Chipotle. That's my go-to. And after I eat that burrito bowl, done. I don't need to eat until the next day. forget that in our faith as people of God, we have been given the gifts of the people of God. That means when we can take little, it becomes much if we believe. Too often we look at 5 loaves and 2 fishes and are just like the disciples. We go, oh Jesus, this is not enough. We need to send them out to go get their own thing. I mean, shoot, they've got money. They can go get their own food from the village just down the way. I mean, McAllister's is right up the road. And they have really fast service. Too often we are the disciples and we look at that small amount. I mean, 5 loaves and 2 fishes amongst 12 disciples is not that much. I mean, on average, a fish might feed 2 people. And you break the loaves of bread in half, maybe a third, and you might get a little portion on each. I mean, that's barely a snack. And you have to think, too, that maybe these people coming to visit Christ and to follow Christ should have brought food with them. I mean, didn't they plan ahead? Didn't they have their diaper bags full of goldfish? Their purses full of fruit snacks? And Capri Suns galore? I mean, I can't make it out of the door without those things, so I don't know how these people are traveling without food. And yet somehow, in some way, this is all that they have. 5 loaves and 2 fish. Perhaps it's because some little person throughout the day had gone, hey, can you feed me? And to keep them quiet so they could hear Jesus speak, they said, here. But that doesn't satisfy us, does it? A little snack throughout the day doesn't give us enough to keep us going. Not fully. You see, snacks throughout the week are good, right? I love me some snack time. 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. That is our designated snack time in my house, and that is because if I hear your voice asking for something before that, when we've just had breakfast at 8, I might freak out. And if it's after 3, it's a little too close to dinner, right? But I don't know about you, I struggle going from noon until 6 without having something in between. I had the kids help me fill out this calendar, right? Because how many of us at the beginning of the month fill out our calendars for the upcoming events going on in this month? Perhaps looking into the next, depending on how your calendar is set up. I tend to avoid September like the plague because then that makes me flip another page and I can't do it. But I need to know, right? I need to know what's happening so I can plan for it. And yet we hear this story, this unplanned event. This unplanned moment of worship, this unplanned time of learning and coming together and being satisfied. And it makes me wonder and question, how do we as people of faith maintain that satisfaction on a week-to-week week-to-week basis. You see, sometimes it is hard to eat until you are full, depending on what is offered. And I say that honestly because sometimes in the life of the church, when you're planning 52 weeks of church, it can be hard to have a continuous continuity, a good meal every single time. I mean, I don't know about you all, but I have burned quite a few dinners. And ice cream for dinner is a normal occurrence around my house. But ice cream for dinner tastes really, really good until about 10 p.m. when what are you again? You're hungry. You see, we can't always get loaves and fishes, and so we must find ways to maintain that satisfaction throughout the weeks. You're not always going to have these moments where you can eat until you are so full you are overwhelmed and it sustains you for the next day or days. You see, the people who were here followed Christ knowing that they would get the good meal. They followed him. He tried to get away from them. It tells us that in verse 13. He withdrew from them in a boat to a lonely place apart. But the crowds heard it and they followed him on foot from the towns around. They stood there all day just to eat. I'm fascinated often with the images and the photos of the 1930s. After 1929 Great Depression, what images do we typically see? You know the one I'm picturing in my brain, right? The bread lines. Where people would wait all day long for a loaf of bread. Just so that they could eat. These people waited all day long for loaves and fishes that they didn't know they were getting. Just so they could eat of the word of Jesus. You see, many times in our Christian faith, we take the word of the Lord and we liken it to bread, right? We jokingly will say that, you got to eat of bread every single day. It can't just be cake on special occasions, right? When you're reading your scriptures, it should be daily bread. But too often we're like this. We only mark down the important events, the things that stick out in our head, and yet we take for granted the daily moments. The things that sustain us and satisfy us and hold us up in times of great need and trouble. Cake doesn't satisfy you for but a moment. You might regret it even. Or kick yourself in the morning. But bread. Bread. Broken bread. In this one moment feeds 15,000. in this one moment, satisfies. How much more does that broken bread satisfy us when we liken it to the broken body of Christ? You see, they don't know anything more about Jesus than that he is a healer and a teacher. And yet they follow after him. We who know so much more, we who know so much more, struggle. Or perhaps it's only a personal struggle and I'm preaching to myself. I don't know. But sometimes I struggle to be satisfied in the life that we live on the day-to-day, to recall and remember that this is the bread of life, that I need to do this, to read it, to eat of it daily. That I can't just wait for it to be given to me, but I must go and seek it. I must wait in line. I'll never forget my very first concert. In sync. Oh yeah. We packed up our tent and our sleeping bags because they didn't have the internet where you could click on tickets then. You had to wait in line. So we packed up our sleeping bags. It was a huge deal that our parents even let us do this. And we stayed overnight, taking bathroom breaks at the place at the 7-Eleven across the way. I wanted it for a ticket to a concert. How much more should I want it for a ticket to Christ? You see, we talk a lot of talk about the satisfaction we can find in Jesus, and yet we do not walk the walk as if we act that way. We don't act as if Christ is worth waiting in line overnight for. Because guess what? We can find him everywhere, can't we? I mean, I can go around the corner to the Lutheran church if I'm not happy here. Or the Baptist church. Or I can go online and find me a wonderful YouTube-esque sermon, which ours are online. They might not be that great, but... But I wonder, too, if perhaps part of the satisfaction is found in the unity of people together, witnessing and experiencing a miracle together. Because isn't it quite a miracle to take 5 loaves and 2 fishes and feed that many people? Or perhaps the crowd is just simply unaware of what they have been a part of. They're satisfied without even knowing what went into it. Sometimes that's the beauty of our faith. We come in and we don't know what has come before us. The preparation, the time, the people, the effort, the energy. You see, just after this part, Jesus again tries to get away from people. to get away from them, and yet they follow. And they keep on following because there is something about Christ that lets them know that they will receive the food they need to be full. So it begs of us the question today, are we satisfied? Are we eating of the daily bread? Are we making our faith a priority on our calendars? Are we willing to wait in a crowded space and time to hear Jesus? These are questions we have to ask of ourselves as we head into the upcoming months of this year. Because our calendars will fill up fast with things we consider priorities. Days we circle in red, because let me tell you, August 28th is circled in red. But it makes me curious, it makes me wonder if we shouldn't be circling every Sunday in red, every prayer time in red, every devotion, every Bible study, every moment in red. We don't have the benefit of being in this crowd. In fact, sometimes our crowds are a little thin. But we know when we eat of the bread of life broken and given to us by Christ, there is no greater satisfaction.